Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I am your host, the Rambling Film Lover, and this episode I'm kind of doing a part 2 or a continuation of the last rambling episode that I uploaded, which the theme is Oscar snubs. And for this episode I was going to focus on one actor in particular, but I can't help it in this case. It has to be two actors from the same film. Now, the last episode I talked about Toni Collette's Oscar snub for her performance in Hereditary and how upsetting it was for me. So much so that I've been left pretty disillusioned with the Academy Awards in general. So I'm not really feeling them right now. And it actually had me thinking about this other film that I had seen before that left. I mean, the whole film itself is also very unsettling. The subject matter is very strong. And so we're seeing very powerful performances from two actors in general. And the film I'm talking about is Prisoners. It came out in 2013, and it is from the exceptional director Denis Villeneuve. Now, I saw Denis' work sort of out of order, and that seems to be the theme with me lately. The first film I saw of his was actually Prisoners. This was my introduction to his incredible work, his tone, the feeling. Like, you know how you can tell a Fincher film is a Fincher film? I've noticed the same thing for a Villeneuve film. And he's really been in the forefront lately because of his exceptional work. So after I had seen Prisoners, my brother had actually recommended Enemy, and it's great. It's a bit of a puzzle, and it's also starring the ever so talented Jake Gyllenhaal, who's just, I swear, if I were an actor, I'd love to have a career like his trajectory. It's just, it has no limits. So I saw Enemy, and then Sicario kind of around the same time, which is great. I think the American public is more familiar with his work in Sicario. He did not do the sequel, which it's also a good film, but again, I'm not too much of a fan of sequels, and there is something in the sequel that kind of had me rolling my eyes a bit, but I may go into that in another episode. Like, there's something that happens with a character that I'm just kind of like, ugh, seems like a bit of a cop-out. And I think maybe some of you may know what I'm talking about. If not, I'll delve into that some other time. Afterwards, I saw what is probably my favorite Villeneuve film, which is Arrival. It's so beautiful, and I'm so in love with it and the story and the soundtrack. Villeneuve is not responsible for the soundtrack, but I'm just saying that that's one of my favorites to listen to, especially if I want something soothing to listen to. It is so moving. It's beautiful. It stars Amy Adams, and it's spectacular. Of course, I think American audiences also know him better now for Blade Runner, the sequel. And I'm a diehard fan of the original, and I think the sequel is good. But I have my own opinions about it. I think just more the story than anything, but it is aesthetically, like, it's eye candy to the extreme. It is so beautiful. Ridley Scott had his image, his vision for Blade Runner, which is unique, and it is signature him. For the Blade Runner 2049, the same can be said for Villeneuve. He knew what he wanted it to look like, and he pulled it off splendidly. So after all these films, I grew curious about Denis Villeneuve, and I wanted to see what else he had done. And that means seeing his French language films. And the one I pulled up was Polytechnique, which is based on something horrific that happened in the 80s. And I had already known about that when I read about it a couple years ago, you know, and as a woman, it was really jarring for me to hear that something like that had happened. But it honestly doesn't make it any less jarring when something like that happens to people regardless of their gender. So when I had heard he did a film based on that, I wanted to see it, and it's a very strong film and something that I think everybody should see. It's done in black and white, and it's very well done. It's beautiful, and it's haunting, and it tells the story. It kind of reminds me, I guess, of Gus Van Sant's Elephant. It did the same for me. Elephant is heavily based off the Columbine shooting. Polytechnique is heavily based on the Polytechnique shooting in Montreal. And so after seeing all these films, Denis Villeneuve quickly rose in my list of favorite directors. He has a really unique vision. He has a very elegant, soft, and yet gritty at the same time type of style. It's a bit of everything blended in. The pacing is usually the same. Like he has this style. It's dark, but it's soft. I'm probably not using the best words I can come up with, but it's still like kind of fresh in my head because I had rewatched Prisoners the other day too, and I'm kind of comparing it to Polytechnique. But I like what he does, and I'm very excited for Dune, as I think everybody is, because it is a big undertaking. And not that David Lynch couldn't do it, but the production had been marred with its own issues, and I guess it was never really going to be what he envisioned. I think in this case, Denis Villeneuve knows exactly what he wants to do. I think hopefully the studio is protecting it as well. You know, Dune is a very ambitious project to take on, and I'm glad it's getting its second wind. Kind of like his Dark Materials. It's better as a show, and it's getting its second wind as well. I like stories like that. That's probably one of the few times that I am more than okay with a remake of sorts. Sometimes a 2-hour film or whatnot is not enough. It's too limited of a medium, you know. It has to be as a miniseries. So Denis Villeneuve blew my mind, and Prisoners, being the first film of his I ever saw, was also story-wise something very disturbing. It deals with two families who have to deal with and endure that moment, that purgatory after their two daughters are missing and presumed kidnapped. So Hugh Jackman plays the father of one of the girls that's been kidnapped, and he and his wife, as well as the other parents, are going through all the emotions while they're gritting their teeth and just waiting, which is agony. Hugh Jackman's character, though, takes it upon himself to try to investigate the kidnapping, because it shows that he's very upset with how the police are handling it, and Jake Gyllenhaal plays a detective tasked with investigating it. So you have these two characters who are both are under tremendous strain, and you can feel the pressure really getting to them. Not one more than the other in my eyes, just differently. You see them buckle under this pressure, and you see what they have to go through dealing with this and going through this. Jake was exceptional. I mean, his character really was going through it, and his performance was just spot on. Again, he is knocking it out of the park in all his performances. But Prisoners is one of my favorites, and the one that I feel should have absolutely been nominated. Probably, I guess, supporting actor. And I really kind of was upset that he wasn't nominated. That year we had some stellar performances, and I'll tell you who won. So I'm not disagreeing with who won. I guess I'm just I'm just wondering why his name could not be on the list of nominees. Because this was, you really see everything he goes through in his acting, in his eyes, in the tone. There's quiet moments in Villeneuve films, and there are in his scenes. And going back to Hugh Jackman, the very same. This is a father, a tortured father, who is running on pure rage and frustration. And he is, unfortunately, he is causing some strain, and through what he believes to be his investigation, he's kind of just burning bridges, but he's getting far. And I don't want to spoil too much, but basically he's doing what he has to do to get further in this investigation. And what he does, and to the people around him, especially this one particular scene that I have to really commend Paul Dano, though, for not flinching, was just like, it was horrific. And I know that there would be a lot of parents, maybe not every single parent, but I think a lot of parents would probably just be like, yeah, I would be so frustrated and practically insane with frustration that I would do the same thing. So it's just, again, the theme with all three: Toni Collette's character, a mother suffering a terrible loss, as well as Hugh Jackman, and even by extension Jake Gyllenhaal, whose character is not a parent but takes his job very seriously. There is a connection with the three of them. The performances are all based on a reaction, emotional strain, and they all have to do with children, what they're going through, to either save one, to mourn one, to figure out something. Like, all of these, it's a reaction to something. And just like I was upset that Toni Collette was not nominated, I was really upset, especially, I think, just by this much more, that Hugh Jackman wasn't nominated. You know, we all know him as Wolverine. He was my first introduction to Hugh Jackman's acting. Hugh Jackman, the actor, was Wolverine. And then we also know he's this musical theater guy. He's wonderful. He's bubbly. He's kind. He's endearing. He's a lighthearted gentleman. So to see him in this role in Prisoners and really just give it his all and play it perfectly without, going too far or too soft, it was mind-blowing, and I was so proud of him. I really wanted to applaud him when the credits rolled up. It was so beautiful to see, and yet so disheartening to see that they completely glossed over this film. And I would really love someone to explain to me why it was just passed over. And I'm not going to accept that it was because it was the Dallas Buyers Club year. I mean, yes, that film was spectacular, but I really wish they would have still acknowledged this one, because it was heavy duty. It was a rich story, and it was one hell of a journey for all people involved. So that year, it was Dallas Buyers Club year, so the Best Actor nomination went to Matthew McConaughey, very much deserved, and the Best Supporting Actor Oscar went to Jared Leto, very well deserved. I had seen that film, and I absolutely agree with that. So I'm not going to argue that those are two performances that were good. I kind of, if I can be completely honest, I do kind of think maybe Hugh Jackman should have won over Matthew McConaughey. That's my ramble. That's my take on it. But if they had just been nominated, that would have been enough too, just so that people know and recognize these two actors. I know we're recognizing them now. It's not that we had ignored them or anything, but it's just like, yes, I see you, Hugh Jackman. I see what you're doing, and I see what you are capable of, and I see how far you're going. Because I guess maybe some people thought he would never even pick a role like this, something so disturbing. But he has done some very serious roles before, and I know in Australia he's done some heavy dramatic films or dramatic roles, but it's just, I mean, this I was very proud of him for picking this, and really he was very much up to the task. And I'll forever recommend this film, because I know everyone's always, if they talk about Denis Villeneuve, automatically they'll say, I think, Blade Runner and Sicario above all. But I would say, you know, go back and see for sure Enemy, for Jake, and for the awesome story that'll have you wondering what the hell's going on, especially with the spiders. But I'll always recommend Prisoners too. It's very heavy, it's very dark, so you have to, you know, carve out time for something like that so you can really sit and focus on this film. And I would also recommend, I always recommend Arrival too, but I think a lot of people did like it, so that's probably not one that we need to bring up as much, because people already know, but Prisoners for sure. And look at me, I'm ignoring the fact that Denis Villeneuve should have absolutely been nominated for Best Director. So yeah, that's another one that, it wasn't the breaking point like the Toni Collette snub was, but it was pretty darn close. It was like right before. Like my irritation was starting to bubble up. And Tony's snub just kind of was the last straw. I mean, we'll see how next year's Oscar nominations are. I'll probably do an episode on maybe who I think should be nominated. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to discuss this one because it seems like it was, I don't know if it was a sleeper. I'm not sure how many people really know this film. And I mean people outside of diehard Villeneuve fans. This came out again in 2013. If you guys have already seen it, please let me know what you think, what you thought of it. What'd you think of the two performances, Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal? I'm just focusing on those two, but the rest of the cast was great as well. These two really stuck out for me the most. Yeah, namely because of what they had to go through, or at least they are focused on a little bit more as well than the other parents. Not that the other parents aren't seen grieving, but these two, clearly, it's almost like they are a parallel. So they have to kind of go through it. You'll see what I mean if you see the film. Again, if you get a chance, please watch it. I don't think it's on Netflix, but I'll see if I can find if there's maybe a streaming site showing it. I really hope so, especially with all the buzz about Denis Villeneuve and Dune. I would think that streaming sites are excited to be showing some of his other works, so we'll see about that. But again, thank you so much for tuning in for this episode, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Be safe, and I hope you guys had a good weekend. Bye.